Welcome to Beyond the Bee, an ongoing dialogue about the past, present, and future of the B Corp movement. Co-hosts Emmy Allison and Ryan Honeyman facilitate an open and honest conversation about the B Corp movement, advise companies on how to increase their impact, and provide a deep dive into the new B Corp standards that are shaping our community.
I'm Ryan Honeyman, and I'm joined by my colleague and co-host from Lyft Economy, Emmy Allison. Hey, Emmy.
Hi.
Our guest today is Rooney Castle, President and CEO of Rhino Foods. Growing up, Rooney was sure he would not join the family business, focusing instead on becoming the next Wayne Gretzky. As those hockey aspirations faded, he came to see Rhino Foods not just as a food company, but as a business rooted in doing things the right way and caring about the lives of its employees beyond work. Rooney joined Rhino Foods in 2011 on the production floor as a batter maker, held a variety of roles across the company, and stepped into the role of president and CEO in 2023. Today, he works alongside his colleagues to steward the company's purpose and long-term future. Rooney, welcome to the show.
Thank you both for having me. Excited to be here.
So Rooney, maybe you could first start with a bit about the background of Rhino Foods. Why did your parents start the business and what did they hope to build beyond the sort of product itself?
Great question. So we've coming up, actually, I think we just entered our 45th year. So it's been a minute. And so first of all, very just honored and privileged to be able to be a part of a business that's been around for so long and excited to try to sort of continue to steward us in the right direction as we move forward. But honestly, the origin story really is sort of stumbling into this. My folks both went to the University of Vermont. My dad was a hockey player, and then after graduating, became a bit of a hockey coach, was coaching at the university. And sort of in the off season, I think hockey and sports were different back then where it wasn't such a full-time job. So when they wasn't coaching, him and my mom were running a small ice cream shop, a sort of snack bar in the Winooski Mill, which was just sort of like an old mill that had some converted shops and different restaurants in it. And so to make a long story short, they were selling some products out of there and started doing more wholesale, especially when my dad ended up, at the time he was an assistant hockey coach and didn't end up getting the head coaching job, which he was sure he was going to. But then it was a bit of like, oh boy, how do we make this business now work full time, especially in Vermont when in the winter, less people are eating ice cream and they weren't really making any money. So one thing led to another, and they started growing the business through doing different wholesale things. And one of the products they were making, which we actually still make today, is a 6-pound tub of cookie dough and brownie dough that's raw, ready to bake. That was being sold to the Ben & Jerry's scoop shop in downtown Burlington. At that time, there was no such thing as cookie dough ice cream, if you can believe that. And so there was the sort of the lore goes that there was a manager or some employees at the scoop shop in Burlington who were putting our cookie dough that's meant to be baked. So if you go in and buy a cookie or go into the scoop shop, you could buy a cookie or a brownie. They were putting that raw dough as a topping on the sundaes that they were giving out. And it started to do really well. And Ben and Jerry said, we got to figure out how to turn this into a pint flavor. And so they approached my folks and mostly my dad at that time and said, can you help us figure out how to put cookie dough into ice cream and do it in a way that works in our process and is safe for people to eat and enjoyable to eat? And took about 1.5 years, 2 years to figure it out. But once that hit, it really obviously changed the trajectory of the business and has led us to where we are today.
Wow. And so I didn't know all this hockey history of the Castle family. So your dad
it pretty much ends there. It's history. It's ancient history at this point, and those skills didn't pass on. And so, I had aspirations you read in my little bio there, but no, that's about where it ends. Now it's just for fun on Thursday night pickup leagues.
There you go. Wow. It's such just being a California guy, just like the Thursday night is basketball or something like that, but Vermont.
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but I think that coaching mentality and sort of the team mentality that my dad had from his coaching experience really carried through because again, he would describe himself as not a business person, not an entrepreneur, so a lot of those skill sets and the mentality he brought forward from coaching into the business. So I'm sure we can get into that later, but that really helped translate into a lot of the stuff we see today.
Then tell us, how did you get into the business and how did he convince you or you convince yourself, I guess, to join? What was that story?
I had graduated from university and I was fortunate enough to sort of just go traveling with some friends and a cousin of mine. And we ended up doing about an 8-month backpacking trip through Southeast Asia. And then I moved back home because I ran out of money. And so I was like, oh boy. And that's why I started working at Rhino, as you mentioned in my bio there, on the production floor. And my plan was to make some money and then head back over and do more traveling. I'd been doing a language program and was sort of excited about living abroad a bit longer. But one thing led to another and ended up spending about 8 months working in production. And then decided, I sort of liked what was going on. We had some exciting things happening at Rhino that were able to allow me to blend my love of travel, but also what I was learning at Rhino. And so it got me to stay here. And I would say one of the best things about how I got started was being a family business. I know I would have spent some time working on the production floor, but I don't think it would have been, I can't remember exactly what it was, but almost a full year. And so in that time, getting to work alongside everybody and really get to understand at a deeper level what it takes to make our product as a manufacturer gave me a whole different appreciation for those jobs and those roles. And I think also earned me some respect in a way for, sticking through with that and really building a lot of really strong relationships that still exist with folks who are here today.
Yeah, it's very interesting, especially dynamic in a family business too. I think leadership takes on an interesting connotation and you're following in some big footsteps. But I think when people talk about embodying values, the conversation can sometimes drift towards a more like heroic or like savior style view of leadership. You mentioned like your being on the floor allowed you to sort of like have a different perspective and interact with workers in a different way. How do you think about your role as one part of a larger system rather than the person who carries or defines the values on behalf of everyone else?
Oh, that's a good question. There's a meaty one there. It is an interesting being in the position I'm in, having, within a family business has been a journey for me and it will continue to be. But I am very well aware that I'm not like a traditional sort of merit-based CEO, right? Like there's one reason why I'm in the position I am, and it's not because I was smarter than anybody or have more skill or talent than anybody. It's 100% because this is a family business. So there's an immense amount of just stuff that came with that for me in terms of the privilege and that opportunity. And over the last 14, almost 15 years that I've been at Rhino, again, how I've felt about that, how I've thought about that has been very different to continue to evolve. And I think that's really important because that's what helps me. I mean, when I hear about sort of like the question around like, how do I not feel like a hero or a savior? Like, boy, I feel like quite the opposite here, right? Like, I feel like I work really hard to feel like I'm bringing value to this place that I was so fortunate to grow up around and to inherit in a way. And the people that I work with every day, I'm like, damn, like there are some really smart, amazing people here. And why the hell am I in charge of this? Like, how does that happen? And I've grappled with that and I've got my own answers for that. And I've come to terms with how I sit with it. But I am constantly thinking about, well, how do I make sure I'm adding value? It's not about how do I really like lead. And I don't see myself as the tip of the spear here. I really see myself as part of the organization and trying to think about how do we just help make sure that it keeps doing what it's doing. Like I think what's really, from my perspective, is super unique about Rhino is that it's so deeply embedded, like the values and the culture is so deeply embedded within the organization. And the best testament of that is the fact that Ted, my dad, was able to retire a couple of years ago. And it's like a lot of times when there's somebody who's so iconic and such a strong founder personality the way he is, if that isn't ingrained and the values of the company are not deeply ingrained, then when that person leaves, leaves a big old hole and a big old sucking sound. But again, this is not a diss on him. It's a credit to him. His ability to step out of the business and have it almost feel like no difference at all to our employees. Sure, we miss him and it was good to see him here. When he comes, people are excited, but that to me is what really makes my job a lot easier. And it doesn't make me feel like I've got this pressure or this weight of the organization being on my shoulders or like I need to be a leader. Frankly, I just stay out of the way and make sure I'm listening to people and trying to, use my position and my power within the organization to elevate the voices that are the ones who really know what the heck's going on around here and how to keep it going for the future. So I don't know if that answered your question, but there's something in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's an interesting dynamic for sure. And you speak a lot. I think it's easy for folks at Rhino to talk about the values. It's a very mission-driven business. But when you hear the phrase embodying values, and this is, language that you're using, what does that mean to you in day-to-day practice? And like sort of not as an aspiration, but in the actual choices that you make?
I think like first and foremost, like what does it mean, or how could you tell us, so like if a place, an organization is really embodying their values? I always like, my hope would be like when you walk into our building and we hung out and spent an hour and did a tour, like you'd feel something, like you can feel it. It doesn't matter if it's hung up on our wall or you can read the plaques around that says, this is our mission, this is our values, yada, yada, yada. If in that first 30 minutes or hour, you don't sort of like get a feeling like this feels different, then we're not doing it. Like, I don't think I'm doing my job. So like embodying values to me really is that like, it's a feeling. It's hard to sort of like calculate or quantify, but you can certainly feel it. And I hear that a lot actually when we bring people through here. They're like, just sort of feels different. You can pick it up. And that's my sort of like temperature gauge to how we're doing. And so what does it take to like make that happen? I think you were asking sort of like tangibly, what does that look like? Not just aspirationally. And it really is about, it takes time. Again, I was very fortunate to inherit that, but it's all about walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And I think that can be big things, but I tend to focus almost more on the small things. And I've found that you drive more impact and more value with small gestures that really show it and start to embody it, that are consistent and add up over time, than like coming in with one big swooping thing. So to try to give some examples, because I think that's always important. People talk a lot, but often don't give tangible examples. And I don't know if I'd put this one in a big one or a small one, but we do something we call a crash course. It's basically our onboarding program when we bring new employees in. So we're a manufacturing business. As I mentioned, we've got about 200 employees. So during our busy seasons, which was leading up to the ice cream season, we have to hire a bunch of employees, 20 to 30 folks. But anytime we bring folks in, we do that crash course. And the reason we call it a crash course is just a fun aside, is that like a flock of birds or a school of fish, a group of rhinos coming together is called a crash. So it's sort of a fun play on words. So if nobody learns anything from this, my rambling beyond that, then at least it's some takeaway. So in that crash course, it's a 2-day thing, paid time, but I actually sit down to meet with every employee for 30 minutes. And we've actually now just reintroduced where we do that over lunch. So I get to sort of break bread with any new employee that's coming in here. And the purpose of that time is to just introduce myself, but it's more importantly, I'm sort of asking them to get to know them a little bit, where they're coming from, how'd they get to hear about us, what have they heard about us in the community? And then it's just sort of like a very informal conversation where I do share a little bit about the business and I speak to our values in that moment, especially from an employee perspective around, given we've got a fairly diverse group here, how do we show up with mutual trust and respect, and really try to hit them early with that. And I believe, and then again, also get to answer any questions they may have, but that just sets the tone for people right off the bat. Like, again, I tend to hear pretty often from folks is, man, I worked at my last job for 10 years and never even saw like my manager's manager. And here I am day one breaking bread with the person who's apparently in charge. So again, that's not like an ego stroke thing. It's just very much like right from the beginning, that sets a tone and feels different for folks.
How many employees do you have, Rooney? Just to get
we got about 200 right now, but like just last week we were brought, we do it in waves. So over the next couple months, we'll probably hire 30 or so folks. And so I'll do those meetings with probably anywhere from 3 to 10 people at a time. And so that's sort of how it works. And then maybe it's funny, we just hired a new member of our leadership team. And I was meeting with her after her first 90 days. For the first 90 days, we sort of take time and let people just ask questions and learn and listen rather than have to like prove themselves right off the bat. And so after the 90 days, we sort of do a check-in and say, how's it going? What are you seeing? What are you learning? And I share this because, again, I think it's funny because I'm grown up in this business and it's the only way I know. But some of the things she pointed out to me were like, the fact that like apparently one day, I don't even remember doing this, but I was going over to our warehouse, which is an offsite location, and it was a snowy day that we have here in Vermont. And so I was like, oh man, this like walkway is really snowy. And there's a shovel right there. So like I shoveled the walkway, little thing like that. And, so she like was like, and I've worked for 30 years and I've never seen somebody like just both pick up the shovel and do it themselves. And she said, we had a leadership offsite, and, I send out my normal email saying, hey, I'm going to pick up lunch on the way, or breakfast. Anybody want anything for breakfast? I'll grab stuff. She was like, I'm used to being one of the only women on the leadership teams, and typically that task falls to me. So to come into a place and have somebody like not assign that to me, and let alone then the president's asking me, what can I get you for lunch? Again, to me, very small thing. Unfortunate that that's her lived experience, but feels really good that, we can have those little things that start to make maybe people's experiences different. And then a small one, like I'll just end with, is for like knowing people's names, I think goes a long way. And again, 200 employees, I'm not perfect, but I get a lot of compliments when I tour people around and can be rattling off pretty much everybody's name here. And so that's hard for me. I have a terrible memory and I'm really bad at names. But again, a little bit of effort can really go a long way, and really starting to like get a sense of what does that, at least for me, how do I show up and try to do the little things that I think over time consistently start to really show that.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, what's resonating is just like, I hate to make it so vague, but it's just like you actually care, which then shows in a lot of different ways, right? It's like, I care about you enough to know your name. I care about you enough to meet you on day one. I care about you. I care about this enough to like not be too precious to like shovel a driveway. So it's like some sort of humility and caring, some combination in there.
That's the funny part, right? It's like, it's just really some basic stuff of just like being what I believe, in my opinion, is sort of just like, yeah, it's like, man, if somebody walks by a really icy thing that looks like, if there's yeah, of course I'd hope they would maybe shovel that. But yeah, I think it's really well said, Ryan. It's leading with some sense of care.
Maybe we should actually get the value. Like, what are Rhino's core values? Just put that out for folks. So I'm testing you here.
we have a purpose of impacting the manner in which business is done. So that's something that my dad and my folks came up with 35, 40 years ago. And that very much aligns with sort of the ethos of the B Corp movement of using business as a force for good. So right from the beginning, again, as a non-traditional business person, he recognized the value and the influence that a business can have on, of course, its employees and the community it's operating within. So he was very much about, well, how do we use this business as a force for good, do things in a different way to really influence the way business is done? And so that sort of leads us with our purpose. We then, like most companies, have some different, we call them principles that tend to be around finance principle. That's speaking about making sure we are a for-profit company. We're a family-owned business. We don't have a place to turn for venture money. We're trying to keep that pressure off of ourselves. So how do we sort of stay financially independent and be smart? We have one around our employees. So that's really about fostering relationships. It talks about fostering relationships with our employees and their families. And families is sort of an odd word in there, but it's intentional in that a lot of what we do recognizes that we're human beings while we're here at work, but also more importantly, when we're outside of work. And so we just want to like signal that as a connection to whatever you may call your family. That could be your group of friends. It could be blood family. It could be any version of the family you call that. We want to support you here at work so that when you go back into the community, you're sort of in the best version of yourself you can be, and vice versa. What can we do to support you outside of the walls of Rhino so that when you show up to work, you're ready to have a good day of work and not be carrying sort of as much baggage as potentially you could be if we're not able to support you. And it also talks a lot about mutual trust and respect. Again, I'm going on a little long here, but of our 200 folks, we have about 35% new American refugees, given that Burlington and Winooski have been a refugee resettlement area for years. And so we think that makes us really unique and special and brings a lot of value to us. So what we speak a lot about that, of making sure that we do have a lot of differences here. And so when we don't always agree, or we do come up with we do show up with different differences, how do we do so in a way that centers mutual trust and respect? And then I'll just quickly say we've got a customer supplier principle as well as a community principle.
I appreciate that. I love when company values are really specific. It's easy to be like care and compassion, but there's just like a lot of intentionality behind those values. And I think that they are, they like show up in the culture and the work that y'all do. You mentioned a little bit too about some of the real world constraints of the finances of being a family owned business. And it's like you only really have your own sort of safety net to fall back on. When your values come into tension with growth or speed or the financial pressure, how do you navigate those moments personally and also collectively amongst the company?
I mean, I think it's a massive advantage to not have a board of directors or a bunch of shareholders that we need to answer to and have really one priority that they're focused on. So our ability to, I think because of that, we are faced with a lot fewer moments of tension coming to between sort of values and the growth and the speed and all of that. We get to sort of choose how we want to do that. And again, these are all things I've really adopted. I can remember my dad countlessly saying to me, like, I don't care how big we are. I just care how good we are. So it's like growth is going to come. And his philosophy was, in which I fully believe, and we've seen play out here, growth comes, right? You can do good and do well, all those things that we know the B Corp community knows about. But our ability to sort of take that at our own pace is a huge advantage in our opinion, in my opinion. That said, right now we're actually talking a lot about growth and productivity and how do we do more with what we've got. And, we're in a commodity sort of driven market. So we're not going to be around here for 40 more years if we just pat ourselves in the back and don't really get down to work. So how do we do that in a way that really, as I think your question is, how do we continue to hold our values? And so we actually just this past year in 2025, we were wrapping up in October doing what we call a Rhino Day. So it's our one day a year because we're a 3-shift operation. So we've got people working 24 hours a day in different parts of the building and a couple different locations. So one day a year, we actually all get together under one roof at the same time. And it's a day that's sort of meant to focus on celebrating, but also looking ahead. And so for looking ahead, we are thinking a lot about growth and diversification as a way to sort of continue to stay relevant in this space. And so when I shared that and we shared some of our growth goals publicly with everybody in the company, to me, it was like the most important thing to do was to speak to the why, right? So it's like, here's what we're trying to do as a business. Really important, I think, that people sort of know we're going for it here a little bit more than we normally have. But the most important piece is why, to understand like what's all this about? Is this just like new kid in town wants to like grow the business and make more money and like, oh boy, what's happened? So when I spoke to that, where I emphasized it the most was I shared 3 things. I said, these are the reasons, at least again, these are my opinions. You can, happy to debate these with you or come give me your thoughts on this. But the reason that I feel like in the leadership team that I've been working with, we feel like it's really important is number one, has to do with like business resiliency. So again, as a privately held business, if we're not making money, when business happens, we know things happen within business. Our ability to weather the storm through ups and downs, like if we are more financially stable, which will come with some more growth, that gives us sort of a better chance to weather those storms. Hypothetically, like pandemics and crazy administrations and things like that with tariffs. So our ability to weather the storm is a business resiliency piece. If we're more profitable and we continue to grow, it allows us to actually invest more back in the company. And so I shared some specific examples of like over the last 5 years, as we've done some of these things and we've continued to grow, like think about these new pieces of equipment that we brought in. How has that made your lives easier, all of our lives easier, safer, better work conditions, different things? So like giving tangible examples of, think about that piece of equipment costs $500,000. Like can't have that if we aren't making money, right? And also we talked about, we had just recently in this past year increased what we call our wealth sharing. So we have a goal to share previously 10% of our pre-tax profit with employees, and we just upped it to 15. And that only works if you're making money, and the bigger the pot, the more we're going to have to share. So the number 2 was really about being invest back into our business and our people. And then the third was being able to achieve our purpose on a sort of like a bigger scale of that impacting the manner business is done. I think if you're a growing business that is showing that you can do all these things and center your employees and think about the stakeholders, not just the shareholders, and continue to grow, you just got more street cred when you go out and try to spread those practices. So overall, I think just to answer your question more succinctly, it's like when we have those tension points, which don't come up as often because we're fortunate to be a privately held business, we really lean into the values and then try to center like the why, right? And like why, try to get people to understand that, okay, if we are going to try to do something that feels more streamlined, or it's like we're growing, it's a bigger business, these are the reasons and how it may affect you, and sort of give you the reason to believe or the reason why.
I appreciate that. And yeah, I think one of the things that Rhino does better than a lot of other companies is that sort of open dialogue sort of environment that y'all are creating. You are going and presenting these elements and sort of the why and the context, but you're also making room for people to ask questions and to I guess also really sit with it and feel like they're part of the journey and not just like getting yanked along for the ride. And I think there are a number of ways that you do that. If you would speak to some of that, as well as like, how are you actively getting feedback from the team?
Yeah, sorry, I was going to interrupt you there. It is, but again, I was going to say like that reference back to like that coaching mentality. So that's sort of the origin of that idea of whether it was open book management. But I again remember the things my dad said is like, how are you supposed to play the game if you don't know the score, right? So it's like, or the rules of the game. So if people are out there grinding and making cookie dough and they don't know if today was a good day or a bad day, or this was a good month or a bad month, or a good year or a bad year, or how they influence that doesn't sound like much fun, or there's any reason to really be that engaged. So a lot of that open book philosophy that we've got came from that sort of coaching background. But in terms of I think your question was sort of, how do we continue to get that feedback and just hear from employees? And is that correct?
Yeah.
Great. I've realized like the best thing I can do, honestly, and again, I'm fortunate because we've got a great team of people all throughout this organization. And like the best thing I can do is just like show up and ask questions and listen. And so we have formal ways to do this. We have our employee surveys and engagement surveys and company meetings where we're speaking to everybody. But in the last year, the thing I've actually focused on the most is just like being available and going around, like not just saying my door is always open. Like I actually said that to somebody. It was like, you could come see me at this anytime. And this was a guy in our maintenance department. He goes, I don't want to come to your office. I want you to come back here. And I was like, damn, heard. Like, you're right. Like, thanks for like jujitsuing me on that one. Like, that's wonderful. And that was actually sparked me to be like, I've always gone out on the floor and done that, but to be around more in places that I wasn't as much, and to start to not go in and be like, tell me what's going on today. How are you? Like, are you happy? Or you're not? Like, just having conversations and building trust, right? Like it's getting proximate. Ryan, we've talked a lot about this through some of the other work we've been doing together, but getting proximate to situations and starting to like build trust is super important. And so again, like tactically, what does it actually look like? I now once every week or almost every 2 weeks at the most will come in and spend half a night like on third shift, because that's a group that often doesn't get that attention. They work from 10 o'clock at night till 6 or 7 in the morning. And so I'll come in after my Thursday night hockey. It's a perfect thing on the way home because we've finished dinner after hockey, and I swing in here at about 10 o'clock at night, and we'll hang out until whatever, 1 to 3 in the morning. And the only reason I'm here is just having conversations. I'll sit back in the maintenance shop for a couple hours. I'll be out on the floor, or I'll be in the warehouse. And again, at first people were like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? What is this? But then over time, like the questions that come out and the conversations, the thing I'm learning about what people are excited about, what people are challenged by, what people are pissed off by, they're so much more rich after having really, like, again, no brainer, but it's I don't find that a lot of folks are taking the time to do that. And so that's been a really meaningful and impactful thing for me. And so it's really shifting the way I'm thinking about how do I show up? What is my role? And it really is just like listening. And then it's really important to have follow up and feedback on those things. So if people get you some information, doesn't mean I need to give them exactly what they're asking for, but be able to come back to say, oh, here's what I learned about that situation. And let's talk about that a bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. I think something that really strikes me about what you're saying here is like, it's cool that you're like, the team member in maintenance comes to you and you say, my office is open. And then they say, well, you should come to where I like see things from my perspective. And you said, cool, heard. But I think what is really cool is that he felt empowered to say that. And it's like, you're constantly cultivating this culture of feedback, and like, it's a safe place to give feedback and for you to get feedback that like creates this opportunity for people to feel more honest and say what they need.
I think that's a really important part of it. So I'm glad you raised that, because again, if I just start showing up in places and that trust doesn't exist or isn't there, I think it can go the opposite direction. It doesn't work. And it doesn't mean it's perfect and everybody trusts me. And but over time, yeah, it's a very good point that it's an indicator. I always find that it's a good indicator when people are bringing stuff like that to you or being like really honest or blunt. I always start with like, damn, at least they like trust me enough, respect me enough, are comfortable enough to share that. So great. I'm glad you raised that.
One thing that's standing out to me too is along this like basic stuff around like care. Because you could say, if you want to build a good culture, you need to show up on the shift when your employees are not. So there could be like an action step of like, you do this thing and you do that thing. And someone's like, I showed up to the shift. But it's like, do you care though? And there's something more of like it's like a little more intangible that then like drives a lot of these actions that I think people sense, as opposed to like, yeah, I ticked the box of like showing up and like having a beer with someone, but like maybe they didn't actually feel like you really wanted to be there or it was authentic.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Because they might not want you there. Right. And again, I'm learning a bit of time, like even got that feedback, like nice to have you there, but that was a little long, like move, like we got stuff to do. And like, because I get excited by it. I'm back there, we're talking and we're getting in, and it's like, okay, that's a good reminder. So absolutely. Yeah. And it doesn't feel like it actually is the stuff that excites me the most about my work right now is like going and having these conversations and like learning. It's not a check the box activity. I drive home at 3 a.m. and I've been up all day. It's like, I'm not like, boy, I'm exhausted. Why'd I do that? I'm like, I have a hard time falling asleep because all the things rattling around in my head. So you're right. The combination of the two things you just shared, the two of you, super important. It can't just like go one day and show up and think that's going to be productive. And again, I'm inheriting this culture. This is not me being the heroic person that has done this. It's like, this sort of exists, right? It works for me to slot in this way. I'm doing it more intentionally, I think, than anybody's done before in the leadership position, but it exists in other places. Other managers all across the company are very approachable. They're they're across shifts. So it's not this thing that all of a sudden Rooney CEO has come down and gracing us with his presence. But people do appreciate that opportunity to have that exposure and that platform.
It's something like, I'm working through this live as we're having these conversations, but it's almost like you're sort of like the emotional support and like motivator, and like people look at you and like sort of project onto like, oh, like he actually cares about me because he came down, and that then like creates value for the business. But like a lot of people are like looking towards you and your behaviors in a way that I guess maybe different, maybe like employees or maybe managers, but not the CEO. There's just like a lot of that figurehead responsibility, whether or not you actually have the power to sort of like change things, or like you said, you have a lot of great people working for you who are making a lot of amazing decisions, but it's still like people look to you and say like, is he actually helping motivate and guide us on this path, rather than like maybe even more so than sometimes you feel like you have control over like the way that the business is going. I don't know. Am I making sense at all?
Yeah, what it makes me think of, again, I think at least the piece I was resonating with me is around like the consistency of showing up, and it takes time and to build that trust, right? It's like if I just parachute in every once in a while, it doesn't really work. But people are a little bit, again, like I actually, it reminds me of Ryan, I can't remember, I won't remember to give this the proper credit that is due, but in some of the work we were doing through White Men for Racial Justice, and there was a story about, somebody showing up to a rally, and like a white guy showing up to a rally, and like the black guy next to him looks at him and is like not very trusting of the whole situation. And the next week he's there again. And it wasn't until like 3 months in that the person was like, all right, I see you showing up consistently. Right. So again, different context, but similar idea of like, it can't be like a month-long pet project of mine. It's got to be something that, and I've heard that directly from people, is like, I didn't necessarily trust or know what this was about, but damn, you've now been 6 months and you're still here on third shift. All right, let's, and then they're not saying it exactly like that, like, but they're saying, all right, now here's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Maybe one other question is around, are there any examples of decisions where a values aligned path was like harder, slower, more uncomfortable in the short term, where you're like, damn, this sucks, but it's like the right thing to do, that then was beneficial for the company?
I don't have any that feel like, damn, this sucks, but I have ones that were like, they were certainly didn't feel like the easy path. One that pops right to my mind has to do with formalizing our like inclusive hiring practices. That was certainly one that was like something we sort of did informally. We realized this was sort of fraught. It was like, oh boy, who's making these decisions about who can? We were doing background checks, and that was like, well, it was up to one person in HR. They were like just sort of deciding if whatever came back, they were sort of the filter, and it was like, ooh, that's not good. So again, a decision was made, over time to more formalize our inclusive hiring practices. And that came with its fair share of challenges in a variety of different spaces. But over the years and over like time and working through that and listening to people, and, it has certainly gotten, the short-term problems have led to, or not problems, but the short-term tensions have been far outweighed by the long-term benefits of that program. And sort of like building on that, like another, in the last couple of years, like a tangible example of, we talk about we're being a fully inclusive hire. We also do, we talk about being a recovery friendly workforce here, or workplace. And we were getting direct feedback from folks in recovery that they actually didn't feel that safe for some stuff that was going on, especially over the night and third shift, and sort of become known in the community that there was folks here, and, there was some whatever sketchy stuff maybe happening in the parking lot. You're sort of getting wind of that. So people were saying, you say you're recovery friendly, but here's my lived experience working here as somebody in recovery. And again, Emmy, to your point, first thing that goes in my mind is like, damn, thank God this person trusts us enough to say that and bring that forward for us. So we'll take that as a win. And how do we now do something with it? And so what it was sort of came up to me through some folks, and like the potential decision on the table was like, well, do we put more lights in the parking lot? Do we need to get somebody like patrolling the parking lot and a security guard at the door and all this? And I was like, damn, I mean, if that's what we got to do in order to make sure that our people in recovery feel safe, like, I'll do that. But that doesn't feel like us. Like that, somebody tapping on your window when you're on break, you're eating your lunch, and if you wanted to be in your car, then like that doesn't feel like Rhino. So I said, what else could we do before, like, is there something else we could do before getting there? And I said, let's go talk to people, right? And so this was like I think the more challenging part was this took time and a lot of energy, but we set up 3 different focus groups with folks across the company and invited them to say, if you're in recovery, or if you want to be part of this solution, come show up and help us just have these conversations about how could we improve the situation. And again, I'll make a longer story short, but got some really good stuff that came out of that in terms of how could we really show up and support our people. And within 6 months, it was a totally different scenario, and people felt really seen and heard and supported, and it really cleaned up the issue. And again, very different than all of a sudden you're getting patted down or somebody's flashing their flashlight into your car while you're on break. Again, I was willing to go there if that's what it was going to take, but it just didn't feel like who we were.
I appreciate that. I really appreciate the intentionality. And I think also like the creativity that y'all brought to that situation and also to many situations that arise. And these are issues that most workplaces wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. And these are hard things. And I think you all meet them head on. And yeah, with like the team involved. And I think that's, why we're here having this conversation today.
Can I ask you a question on that? I'm curious from your opinion or from your experience talking to folks, what do you think it is? Because I agree with you, but I'm wondering what keeps people from wanting to touch something like that with a 10-foot pole, or it doesn't need to be that one, but what is sort of the hesitation that you think you see in organizations that's leading to different outcomes?
I think business as usual is always trying to reduce risk wherever possible. And you all are introducing a lot of risk in the open hiring and being a workplace that's friendly to active recovery. They're just like, that's a lot more risk. And that's literally in your example is a very real example of one of those risks. And it's like, it's all in service in business as usual. It's all in service of the bottom line. Let's be as efficient as possible. Let's not spend this additional time training people and making people feel comfortable and safe. And yeah, it's extra work. And it's like easy to draw the dotted line between like not even trying and profitability. So, but yeah, again, I think that's why, I think when we think of leadership, I think that Rhino Foods pops up into a lot of people's minds in the B Corp community because you have been, as we say, embodying these values for many years now. And also on top of that, like sharing with the community, like some of your best practices, which I think is really key here as well. It's like y'all, I think you referenced it earlier. It's, you get to show, you get to walk the walk, you get to model like that this works and it can be a viable business, and more than viable, it can be thriving. And so, yeah, I think it's really tough. And that's why people don't really try.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. Pivoting a little bit. I think, we started on this sort of track of like, oh, what is it like? Sort of, there's all these different nuances to be a leader in a company like Rhino. And you have this sort of like servant leadership approach to like a leaders eat last type of approach to a lot of your work. But I'm also curious who else at Rhino holds sort of like real responsibility for decision making, but also living the company's values. And how is that responsibility shared beyond the CEO role?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know how good I'm going to be at answering this because it's just like it's what I like grew up with here and inherited. It's so, as I said in the beginning, it's like it's so ingrained that like decision making, like I don't find myself people aren't bringing me a whole lot of decisions. Like my day is not filled with like things sliding across my desk and decide on this. I just like we're so fortunate to have, it's almost like one of those, like, if you build it, they will come kind of things. And, I didn't build this, so I don't get credit for that. But like a lot of people over time have built what this is. And that goes well beyond just beyond my dad. And so we get people who come to Rhino who like want to sort of just like live that experience and be part of that. And so, our decision-making structure, I don't even know. I'm not even that like clued in. It's just like it's pretty distributed, and we try to give people autonomy in their spaces to make decisions, and they know they've got the support of those around them if they need help. We tend to be, my dad was very, almost probably to a fault. I would even, I'd say that if he was here to like wanted consensus on things, then it'd be like, okay, sometimes we can't have full consensus just as the business has grown. So we've tried to, I think we've dealing a little bit of that because everybody really wants to be part of the meeting and the say. And so we've had to work around how do we make sure we're not being too inefficient in that space. But people care, and our hope is that they feel like they're empowered to make decisions. And again, we ebb and flow between where that works and where that doesn't and where we can improve. It's definitely not perfect. But, I'm going away on a 3-week honeymoon next week, and this place will run better without me here than it will with me here. Right. And so it's that type of thing where somebody was like, our director of people culture was like, are you going to send out like the plan? I was like, what do you mean the plan? She's like, the plan since you're gone. I was like, do we need a plan? She's like, no, but I think from optics standpoint, I think it's good to have a plan. I was like, I can send out an email saying we've got a plan if that's what she's like, all right, let's do that. So, it's like I sort of joke about that because it's honestly, I have no worry or stress about, 3 weeks isn't that long, first of all, but even if it was 3 months, because of the sort of system that's been built here and the people that are a part of it. And again, it's always refreshing when new folks come in, and are not refreshing, but it's always interesting. I reference the person on our leadership team who comes in and she just like, it's so different. I'm used to like, it's just everything is so much more cutthroat. Like people actually like are trying to help me here. Like they're offering to support versus where I've come from in the past, which again, not all companies are like this, but it was very like you protect yourself in order to keep moving. It's the zero-sum game mindset. And she was like, the first month I was like, what is going on around here? So that makes me really happy to hear. And I guess to your question, I don't really have a good answer because again, I inherited this thing and I'm just trying to not screw it up. And I guess going on a 3-week honeymoon will allow me just to stay out of the way and let it get done.
One thing I want to double click on is this. I do know that your dad has built this great culture and you kind of came into it, but I also don't want to undersell how quickly that can go south if the leader is not reinforcing things. So like if you stopped doing the sort of 1 a.m. Thursday night thing and you never saw the sort of maintenance guy, you never went to his place, and you stopped doing the meetings with people, I think you would see the culture shift. Like I think it's actually like, I guess I don't want you to sell yourself short on like the ability to like keep it going is actually pretty hard, right? And to like, there's a lot of things that have to be the seeds that have to be planted constantly. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and again, I say all this can sound so rosy. Like there's lots of work we have to do here, right? Like it's not perfect. You're going to talk to every one of our 200 people. There's people who've got plenty of things to say, and it's not all rosy and peachy. So yeah, like it isn't. I do need to be careful. You give myself some credit from time to time, right? Of like, I think what I bring here is not, especially as a that non-traditional merit-based CEO, like I often do feel sort of that imposter syndrome of like, I don't know a lot about finance. Like, I don't know a lot about like running an operation, but like, I do have a good sense of people and, connecting with people and hearing people and then like getting the people together who really know how to make things happen. So I'm finding again, more and more like in my role, which is an important role, is to use sort of my position of power and privilege within our organization to help elevate or connect the people who really are the ones who need to be doing or need to be connected and doing the work, and hold those maybe a little bit of some accountability here and there. But yeah, I guess thanks for raising that, Ryan. It is, it can get screwed up. You look at most family businesses, I don't know the exact stats, but plenty of people told me them before we transitioned, is that, one generation, every time you try to hand off a generation, the odds are certainly against you. And I do feel very fortunate to have we put a lot of intention into that transition. My dad and I, it was a 5-year process. We have a really strong relationship. And it was really important to us that we maintain that strong relationship through all this. And so first and foremost, where we were concerned about maintaining our connection, but very close behind that, it was like, how do we make this work for all of our people? Because we've seen plenty of examples where generational businesses hand off and it's messy, both for the family members, but especially for the folks who work in the business. And so we were tried to be really get ahead of all of that. We talked to a lot of different businesses, what worked, what didn't work, we're fortunate to know a lot of family business owners. And I give my dad all the credit in the world, because the harder job is to step away, right? Like this is his third child, essentially. He's got a connection to it that I will never have, given the way we both experience the business. And so his ability to let go is the biggest difference maker between other businesses that we saw go through this. And it's not because he's like headed down to Florida and doesn't give a hoot about the business. He cares. Like he would wants to be here. So it's a big intentional effort on his part to create that space and give me my space, and how we communicated that out to people, but also still honored him in, and how he continues to show up in the business in different ways. So that I think it's sort of a side, because we're talking about family business transition, but I think it's a really important part of how I've been able to be successful, is that I was sort of teed up through that relationship and that transition.
Emmy, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. I think it's interesting in the new standards, there are some opportunities for like leadership to improve, to like work on themselves and like their skill sets. Yeah, there's some like various elements here. And I think it's one of the Jedi sub requirements is like leaders go through a certain like diversity, equity, inclusion training, periodically or something like that. And I heard you mention too, yeah, I think family businesses can be pretty insular, and it's cool that it sounds like you have a community of other sort of family business sort of stakeholders that you get to learn and grow from. But what are some other ways, what are some other ways you keep your tools sharp in terms of leadership and growth and, being a better leader?
Yeah, I think what you just shared, I think getting out and just like meeting with other businesses and with business leaders, whether that's family business or otherwise, I think it's just important to get outside of these four walls, especially as somebody who this has really been my total career has been at Rhino, right? And so that's nice in a lot of ways, but that's also, I think, is a potential barrier. It's if I could do it again, I would almost like go try to find some time and space to get experience in a different business for a variety of reasons. But that day is come and gone, at least at the moment, it feels like it has. So getting out and seeing other folks is super important. By far the most influential thing that has like continued to shape me as a leader, but more importantly as a human, is the work I've been doing with a group called White Men for Racial Justice that I referenced earlier. And while that is sort of racial justice focused, it really is about how we show up as humans. And it has completely changed the way that I didn't even have like a tool for that before. It's not even like sharpening my tools, like just brought me an item that I didn't really know how to operate before. And I'm learning and continuing to learn like what that means for me personally, especially as somebody is a privileged leader of this business that oversees a lot of people. And so that's probably been, and that's an ongoing journey. It's an ongoing thing. So that's probably like the single most influential thing that has helped me in a variety of spaces. And again, really does impact how I show up as a human being within the business.
Also, as a fellow member of White Men for Racial Justice, it's been very powerful, and it's been great to know your dad through that as well, and your brother. So the full castle fam. And yeah, I do see the intersections. And I'm also, curious how potentially maybe some of that goes to like looking back. What do you wish you had understood earlier about leadership or embodiment? I mean, it can be related to WMRJ or not, but just more of like some of those key learnings you sort of, wish you knew.
This is probably not related directly, but I think if like one of the things that pops in my head, like looking back, I did a lot of humming and hawing around like the opportunity that I had, and should I, do I want to work in the business? Do I not? And when I was in it, we were thinking about, I was working with some folks of like, are we going to actually, is my goal to sort of take over the business and continue it in that, on to the next generation? There was like, I had a lot of confidence issues with that. I had a lot of just feelings about it. And so, not that it was wasted time by any means. I think it was an important process for me to go through. But if I could like go back and talk to myself 10 years ago, it would be like, it's like, it's okay to just like recognize that you are not on, I've said it a few times, that traditional merit-based CEO path. Like that's not who you are. It's going to feel very different. It's going to look very different, and that's okay. And then be aware of that and be aware of what that means. And I didn't have sort of all of the language there for like earned versus unearned privilege at the time. But I think that would be like step one, it's okay. Like step into this. And then as you're doing that, be intentional, be aware of that, and have that help shape and influence who you are as a leader. How are you showing up? And again, I feel fortunate I feel personally I'm not this. Some people could disagree, but like, I don't feel like I'm showing up as that like savior or as that like tip of the spear. I'm more and more thinking about how do I, as I said before, use my position and my power to elevate the voices of others. And that's probably what I would go back and say is like, be confident. It's okay. It's a reality. You're going to deal with it. There's going to be some people who judge you for that or have feelings about it. You can't control that. All you can do is step into it and sort of make it your own and be aware of that and be humble about it but use it for good.
Yeah. And maybe the merit-based leader, like the counterfactual, right? I did it because I'm the operational excellence and like finance lead, and I've got 30 years of, but maybe that's not the right leader for Rhino, right? So it's also hard to know.
I should say there's nothing wrong with that leader. That's just like, that's the leader I wanted to be. I wanted to feel like I earned this in a way that like I'm not going to say it's like I'm the smartest person in the room, but boy, like maybe that I knew a little bit more than I do, right? It's like, I got people who are so much smarter than me all around me. And that's like great. But at first I was a little bit like, well, what do I do? What's my role? How do I like, I feel like a total imposter. And you could feel like a total imposter in that mode. So again, I should make sure I clarify there's nothing wrong with that path. Like I was envious of that path. I sort of wanted that feeling, but it wasn't my reality. And I think this is a better path for us here at Rhino for sure.
For people listening who are not CEOs or senior leaders, how can values be embodied without positional power?
Great question. I will come back to the statement I said earlier, which is really around, I think to me, it starts with sort of that, regardless of where you are, is getting proximate. And to me, that means like just trying to like show up and listen and understand, because when you do that, and I think what happens is we talk a lot about trust here. So I think anywhere you're at, finding ways to build trust is super important, because then you're going to start to know what's really going on. And that's how you can start to influence and shift the culture and embody those values. So you got to show up, you got to get proximate, and you got to be patient and consistent with it. So, and do a lot of listening. Those are probably like, they're not that profound, but those are the things I would be encouraging people to do, because I think then the path starts to unveil itself when you do that, and you start to see little light bulbs, points of connection that you can make that otherwise, if you're not proximate and if you're not consistent or you're not building trust, they're just too hard to see because people aren't sharing with you. Don't know if that's a great answer, but it's really what I'm feeling the most sort of inspired by and passionate about in the moment. So that's why it came into my head.
I think we're going to wrap up this episode. We like to ask all of our guests, what do you and your team need right now? And how can listeners support the work that you're doing?
What do I need right now? I mean, I think we all need, this is not what I need, but I think we all need to remember to sort of try to find areas to center some joy every once in a while. There's just so much going on that feels really heavy, and it's not to ignore that. You need to not turn away. I think about a lot of folks in my spheres where the privilege that you can have to not feel some of the stuff that's happening as tangibly as others. And so I encourage people to lean in and pay attention and show up, but also make sure that you're finding places and reminding yourself that there is joy in sort of the work of us all trying to be better. And that for me is an important message that I continue to remind myself. So I think more people around us are doing that. Can't be a bad thing.
And where can people learn more about you and Rhino Foods?
Where can they learn about me? We have a website. It's rhinofoods.com.
The website's pretty cool.
That's on there.
Yeah.
And otherwise, somebody's in New Zealand in the next 3 weeks, I'll be there, but probably not by the time this is aired. So I think I'm on LinkedIn, but website's the best spot to learn a bit more about. And we also have a whole foundation now that we've talked about our purpose of impacting the manner business is done in about I don't know, 5-7 years ago, we created a foundation, a nonprofit called the Rhino Foods Foundation that really is geared towards just spreading a lot of these things. Again, we don't have it all right, but we found some things along the way that we think really work. And our mission in the foundation is just to spread those to other businesses. So definitely worth checking that out at rhinofoodsfoundation.org as well.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining, Rooney. It's been a pleasure, and it sort of makes me feel a lot more close to Rhino and like understanding your mission, and just really hope you all are successful, because we really need more companies like you guys.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, I appreciate the conversation. It's a nice shot of energy to get to do something like this with you all. So I appreciate the invitation and the interest.
Hey, Beyond the Bee listeners. If you're looking for even more inspiring conversations with leaders on the front lines of our movement towards just futures, be sure to subscribe to Next Economy Now, produced by the team at Lift Economy. Next Economy Now broadens the focus beyond the B Corp movement to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, democratic, equitable, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy. Check out our latest episodes at lifteconomy.com/podcast. You can subscribe to Next Economy Now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.